Philippine Mining Club and the Philippine Infrastructure and Construction Club are professional networking forums bringing industries together and creating opportunities for the Philippine mining and infrastructure and construction industries. Networking is about giving, not taking. It is about forming trust and helping one another toward mutual goals, regularly engaging with your contacts, and finding opportunities to strengthen relationships. Networking is a great opportunity to exchange best practice knowledge, learn about the business techniques of your peers, and stay abreast of the latest industry developments. Opportunities like partnerships, invitations to events, introductions, and giving talks and presentations bring challenges that benefit and feed your career, professional development, and personal interests. Gaining the advice of experienced peers is an important benefit of networking.
Digital engineering is about connecting the present with the future, the digital world with the physical, connecting possibility with reality. Most of all, it's about bringing value to our clients. The projects we work on are exciting and will impact the future of Sydney for years to come, so getting the best outcome calls for working in a smarter way. We aim to have a partnership with our clients. It's not about building something and walking away. It's thinking about an end-to-end solution. What needs can we foresee and how can we put in place a reliable process now that will keep adding value in future? GHD is pioneering workflows which we expect will become industry standards in future. Digital models are built and stored in the cloud for always-on access to teams around the globe. Workflows assign tasks to people, set deadlines and track costs against a work breakdown structure. Multiple disciplines review a federated model at the same time, resulting in better projects that are coordinated, cost-effective, and developed with stakeholder investment in mind. The transparency this offers our clients is extremely powerful in fostering trust and communication. Taking a measure twice, cut once approach saves millions across planning and construction. Changes to a digital model are faster and provide a better coordinated design for our clients. Data and project priorities are thus what drive decision-making. Ultimately, technology is just an enabler for the inspiration that comes from people, and it's the fresh thinking of our staff that we want to support. We want to unlock notions of what's possible and challenge the expectations of what's an acceptable standard. It's a great way for young people starting out in their careers to contribute because the model shows you what will be in lifelike detail. In the same way, it connects clients dynamically with their future project because they can see and interact with it in real time.
Atty Geophysical Consultants, providing expert advice for geophysical and geotechnical exploration carried out in the mining, metal sector of the materials market and energy market. Provide a wide range of geophysical and geotechnical services to environmental groundwater and engineering industries. Long-term experience in base metal exploration, porphyry gold, and copper exploration, geophysical data processing, and modeling services. We have a wealth of international survey experience over the past 2 decades. Over 28 countries in some of the most remote and challenging environments. Our services: geophysical project design, field acquisition, field supervision, processing and modeling, data interpretation, induced polarization surveys, transient electromagnetic surveys, ground magnetic surveys, unmanned aerial vehicle magnetic service, downhole surveys, radiometric surveys, resistivity surveys, seismic surveys, hostile geophysical consultants,
Again, welcome everyone. Just before we get going, I'd like to mention a thank you to our valued marketing partners for, without them, the event wouldn't be possible. So let's start with our supporting partners. We have Intertech, Hexagon Mining, Autotech, Major Drilling Corporation, Clean Earth Tech, Imdex, Ollie Consulting, First Metro Securities, and Resources Comms. Our foundation partners, We Are Minerals, Site Skills Training, and our principal partners, of course, Austo Geophysical Consultants, advice, guidance in geophysical exploration programs being carried out in the mining metals sector, as well as the coal sector. Austo Geophysical Consultants also provides a wide range of services to the environmental, groundwater, and engineering industries. QED, Asia's leading exploration drilling company with modern equipment and well-trained staff. This has elevated QED to become the benchmark for international standard drilling operations in terrain that is generally typified by logistical constraints, geological complexity, and topographical extremes. Moving on to GHD. GHD has a permanent presence in the Philippines, or has had a permanent presence in the Philippines since 1998, with over 600 professional staff spread across 3 cities in the Philippines, their main office in Makati, and the 2 branches now in Cebu City and Quezon City. Focused on creating lasting community benefits, GHD leverages on its connected global network of 10,000 employees to provide engineering, environmental management services to key players in the energy resources sectors. We do have a new principal partner, which is Prime BMD, and you're going to hear a lot more about them as we move through our series. Our industrial partners. Our industry partners are TVI Resources with the Aguero Nickel project, Oceana Gold. We thank them for their ongoing support. The Philippine Mining Club is also affiliated with the globally renowned Melbourne Mining Club, ANSCHAM, the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, PMEA, the Philippine Mining and Exploration Association, COMP, Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, PMCEA, the Philippine Mine Safety and Environment Association, along with YAMA Philippines. Our media partner, of course, is the Philippine Resources and Construction Journal, which is online. They also have a hard copy of that. I'd just like to say a few words about our I'd just like to introduce, I apologise there, Mr. Roger Dimmel, who will introduce our MC for today. So I'll hand this over to Roger Dimmel. Roger.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I would like to say a few words and introduce our MC today. She is, of course, Attorney Patricia Bunye, who is a senior partner and deputy managing partner for administration of Cruz, Marcelo, and Canafrancia. She heads its mining and natural resources department and the energy practice group. She is also a partner in the intellectual property department. She's past president in the Licensing Executive Society International or LESI, for 2016 and 2017, the first Filipino and Southeast Asian to hold the position. She is also founding partner of the Dewata Women in Resource Development, Inc., which is a non-government organization that advocates responsible development of the Philippines' wealth in natural resources. She's an active member of the Chamber of Mines of the Philippines Legal Committee and is a columnist in the Philippine Resource Journal. She is in the 2020, 2019, and 2018 list of the Philippines' top 100 lawyers and has been cited by the various international law research publications such as Chambers, Legal 500, Asia Law, among many others. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now hand you over to our MC, Attorney Patricia Bunye.
Thank you very much, Roger, for the kind introduction. I'm happy to be back as your MC. Before we proceed to our speakers, I wish to highlight the following. We will be issuing certificates of attendance to our attendees today, and you can request a copy from Ms. Joan Falcutella. For your questions today addressed to our speakers, please type them in the Q&A or chat box at the bottom of the screen. Please indicate to whom you are addressing the questions. I will then read them out to the speakers after all their presentations during the Q&A sessions. And we will hold the Q&A after all the speakers have made their presentations. First, we will have our stock market watch. And our speaker is Mr. Sandy Gilles. Mr. Gilles is a financial analyst working to educate clients of the stockbroker firm First Metro Securities. He used to teach finance in college for undergraduates and for Master of Business Administration students. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to present to you our speaker, Sandy Gilles.
Good afternoon. I will comment today on the price of gold over the past year and the past 10 years. The past year was gold price at 1,700, moving up to 2,000, down again to 1,700, and then up again to 1,900. But still, it's been up above 1,700 and ranging at that price. In previous years, it was down to 1,200, although it had 10 years ago come from the level of 1,800 down to 1,002, up again to 1,900 nowadays, dollars per ounce. It has an inverse relationship with the US dollar. So if the dollar is weak, meaning the index is on the way down, the dollar measured against a basket of currencies, then the gold price tends to move up over time correspondingly or against the trend. If there's a weaker dollar, a weaker US economy, then you'll have people putting their faith in gold as a store of value. Now, if you superimpose the two share prices, the two prices over time, you'll see that they move counter-cyclical. And here's in blue is the dollar index, the strength, strong dollar, weak dollar. And then there's gold price, high price, low price, high price, somehow opposite the trend for the US dollar. Then this dollar is defined as corresponding to 53% euro, 18% yen, and then Swiss franc and other currencies. So it's a basket of currencies that the dollar is measured against. And it tends to be counter-cyclical. Now, it would be easy to see the counter-cyclicality if it were going on a long-term sideways trend. But no, the trend tends to be upward. So even if it's counter-cyclical, they are both moving gently upwards. Now, what I mean is that if the dollar is, yes, moving up and down, but all throughout the past 10 years, it's been gently upwards, the same with the price of gold. So what it looks like is from 2008, when it was a level of over here, both dollar have been overall higher over time, and then also the price of gold indexed to the year 2008. It looks like both of them will be either moving gently upwards or moderately upwards, at least in the case of the gold price, probably moving again to the 2000 level if trends continue. Thank you for listening. You can download this file from my Facebook group on Basics on Stocks and Investing. Thanks for your kind attention. I have been Alexander Gilles, or Sandy, investment advisor in Sydney, Australia. Thank you and good day.
Thank you very much for that, Sandy. And now to our main presentations for today. Please allow me to say a few words about our first speaker, Mr. Kevin Fell, Clean Mining's Group CEO, who will speak on the topic Clean Mining, Non-Toxic Solution to Gold Mining, an update. Based in Singapore, Kevin Fell has over 20 years of leadership experience across a variety of technology-related organizations. He has operated in C-level roles within ASX-listed companies, such as the former ASX-listed mining, oil, and gas solutions provider, ISS Group. He has also been involved in several private investment and corporate advisory firms, as well as in key technology consulting roles for PwC in Asia Pacific. His work is centered on full business and product lifecycle development, from conceptualization and commercialization through executive sales and global operational management for both startup and corporate enterprises. Over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Patricia. I will just look to share my screen if I can. Thanks for your time today. Okay, I just want to give a quick overview of clean mining. Many of you will have attended the last webinar that we did, so I won't take an awful lot of time on that, and just sort of give you a quick update where we're at, and then pass you over to Nicole and Kristina from Clean Mining, as well as Sixto out of the Artisanal Gold Council, who we're very excited to be in partnership with in addressing some of the issues around the artisanal gold sector. So the market opportunity as we see it is to find a legitimate replacement for cyanide and mercury in gold mining. We believe that we're the only genuine non-toxic alternative in this space. There are a number of others which we've mentioned before, but at scale, we believe that we are the only genuine option that's out there. There are other methods, shall we say, that are still underlying as being cyanide when you do the chemical combinations, but we are the most genuine non-toxic alternative. If you look at Standard & Poor's, who do a lot of analysis around the mining industry, there are about 14,700 mines in the public domain that are looking to move from exploration into production over the coming years. About 6,400 of those mines can't use cyanide, or there is an aversion to cyanide. So when you look at the reliance upon a gravity process and then potentially losing the fine gold particles of about 40 to 60% of their production, the need to have a non-toxic leach is a significant economic need. For example, we've had some organizations that have only been getting 30 to 40% through gravity, and we've been taking them up into the late 80s, early 90s as far as gold recovery. So we see a non-toxic leaching process as a huge market opportunity. Together with the Artisanal Gold Council, rather than just focusing on the small to large mining groups, we're working in a plan strategy around how we can be more effective in building community hubs using our non-toxic process. And so far with the testing, which I won't steal Sixto's thunder here, but we're getting over 25% better recoveries by using our technology. So what are the problems with cyanide? An interesting statistic that I like to tell everybody is, on average, it's about 18 tons of contaminated waste just to produce a wedding ring. So when you take that into context, there's an awful lot of toxic waste out there. One of the major things that we're trying to avoid is the tailings dams. I'll go through our process in a minute, but everybody in the industry would be well aware of the issues of tailings dams around the globe, not to mention all of the occupational health and safety and environmental risks associated with cyanide. Many on this call would understand the same issue with mercury, which I think is by far worse, with the chronic metallic vapor intoxication being a huge problem, both in communities, for families, water, land, the whole lot. And I think the whole move around the Minamata Convention to move away from mercury over the coming years is a very, very important process that we need to work through. So we call ourselves clean gold. Okay, so what's the difference between dirty gold and clean gold? Well, in the case of this, and using cyanide as the example, everybody crushes the same. Everybody uses gravity the same. But when we start to go into agitated tanks, we use our reagent rather than a toxic cyanide solution. Then what we can do is recycle the reagent and the water, therefore being even more friendly to the environment. But our difference is we go through what we call a dewatering system, where we produce dry stackable tails rather than using a tailings dam. Whereas if you start looking over at the cyanide process, not only are you putting cyanide into the tailings dams, but you're using other toxic chemicals such as lime and activated carbon and things like that. So we think our overall solution addresses many of the weaknesses in the current cyanide process. The benefits, which I touched on briefly: massive tailings dams. These are estimated to between 25 and 35% of capex plus annual maintenance. If you don't need expensive cyanide destruction services, compliance, OH&S, or hazardous transportation costs, that makes a significant saving. And then comes the rehabilitation costs. By producing dry tailings, we can repatriate those tailings very, very quickly. When you look at the full cost of end-to-end mine life and take all of these things into consideration, not only are we non-toxic, not only are we competitive in recovery, but we're also very competitive, if not cheaper, when it comes down to cost. Many people ask me the question, is it scalable? It's okay if it's five men, but what happens when we get to some fairly decent size mine sites? Well, the first site that started to use this technology prior to us owning it was Barrick Mining. They had a particular problem ore, a double refractory ore in Nevada, and CSIRO in Australia were given a mandate to look to how they could recover the gold from this problem ore. So they produced this solution specific for that ore type, and what we've done since then is move on and make it a much more ubiquitous solution across ore types. But as you can see from this slide here, Barrick is still in production since 2015 and producing 13,500 tons a day. To me, that is a fairly decent sized mine and shows that the solution that we have is scalable. I mentioned earlier on about Standard & Poor's. This is where I got the numbers from. This is a breakdown around the development stage and the various regions where those mines are coming through. But if you look at 6,340 mines, we think that that is only probably 30 to 50% of the actual number, because not every mining company subscribes to Standard & Poor's and provides them the data. But as you will see, there's a significant market already for people that can't use cyanide. Our progress updates, we've come a long way since we launched in February, March 2020. We've got over 500 global leads that we're actively working on. There was 1,500 inquiries that are ongoing, many of those in the artisanal sector, hence the importance of us partnering with the Artisanal Gold Council. We're particularly strong in carbonaceous ores, and we're developing our sales network globally as we speak. But our first 2 contracts have now been signed. In Australia, they're on 8-year contracts, 4+4, and we expect them to be into production into Q4 2021 and Q1 2022. So we've got about another 5 or 6 opportunities that are in the final stages now. So we expect to be ramping up significantly over the coming months. One of the things I briefly wanted to touch on was some comparisons on the rate of extraction that we've got. We've done over 54 mines and samples to date, and I'll go through a couple of different ore types, and you can see how we are comparative to cyanide on this. So if you look at this one, it was a branded iron formation. We tested against cyanide as well as copper ammonia thiosulfate, which is another alternative. As you can see, at 24 hours, we match cyanide almost identically. And similarly, when it comes to oxide ore, both of these sites were in Western Australia, and at the 24-hour mark, we actually outperformed cyanide. In the Americas, we've got quite a number of opportunities at the moment. So we have a sulfide refractory ore where we outperformed cyanide quite well, especially under the 5-hour mark, which isn't necessarily a real life example that you would do on site, but when it comes down to the 24 hours, we were certainly comparable. So when you take in all of the benefits that I mentioned earlier on around tailings dams, cyanide destruction, etc., etc., you are well ahead in taking our solution forward based on these results. In Europe, with places like Turkey, Macedonia, Serbia, etc., all having an aversion or a banning of cyanide, it's really important for these groups to be able to have a non-toxic leach rather than relying on gravity. And as you can see here, we're very competitive with cyanide across the sulfide refractory and oxide ores that have come out of Bulgaria and Macedonia, if I remember correctly. We're also quite active in the Middle East, which is quite surprising. And we're working with a group that's partially owned by one of the governments out there. And what we're finding is that moving our leaching process through to the 48-hour mark, we're getting approximately 79–80% recovery. This time frame isn't a problem for the customer that we're dealing with. However, if they want to pull that back to 24 hours, we're still competitive with cyanide. So it's about an optimization exercise on what are the best recoveries and best cost of money towards the 48 to 50-hour mark. The strategy for the Philippines that we're going through at the moment, we've noticed a change in the Philippines over the last few months. And there seems to be a lot more discussion around embracing sustainable, environmentally friendly mining processes. We're not getting as much pushback that we were talking around with foreign investment. There's perceived to be stability and governance around that, especially when it comes around 10 years of leases, etc. And given the fact that we are the only non-toxic solution that meets those government and authority needs, we're looking for partners now, starting with the Artisanal Gold Council for the artisanal sector, but moving more and more into the medium to larger scale mines out there, and we have a number ready to move into testing. But we are very excited about our progress with the Artisanal Gold Council, and I won't take much more time from everybody today. I really want to get into our Q&A and technical discussions with Sixto and the rest of the team. Thanks very much. Hand back to you, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Now we go to our second speaker, Mr. Sixto Aguero, the Artisanal Gold Council's Chief Senior Mineral Processing Engineer, who will tell us all about their Clean Mining Test Project. Sixto holds a Master of Science in Mineral Processing from the University of British Columbia, Canada, and also a Master of Science in Energy Management from the New York Institute of Technology. He also holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Honduras, or UNAH. He holds 2 positions at the Artisanal Gold Council of Canada, as I mentioned, Chief Senior Mineral Processing Engineer, and also Senior Researcher on mercury-free technologies. He has expertise in design, installation, commissioning, and operation mineral processing circuits in Peru, Indonesia, Mongolia, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone, Suriname, Honduras, Colombia, and the Philippines. Let us all welcome Sixto.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are safe and healthy wherever you are. Good afternoon, Philippines. It is midnight here in Canada. I would like to thank the organizer of this event for inviting me to do this presentation. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. So I will be talking on the collaboration that we have. The AGC is the Artisanal Gold Council and CML Clean Mining Limited. And also I'll be speaking about some test work that we did in the Philippines. Next, please, Job. So we are the Artisanal Gold Council. We are a non-for-profit organization. It means that we don't make profit out of the projects that we develop. The mission that we have is help the miners worldwide to reduce and eliminate the use of mercury into their processing. The headquarters are based in Canada. You can see the yellow star on the map of Canada. We are located at the western part of Canada. And on the red dots that you see in this map is actually, it can be either current processing facilities or it can be facilities that are in progress. So in America, we have projects in Peru, Colombia, Suriname. In Africa, we have Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone. And in Asia, we have Mongolia, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea. The black dots that you see on the map, they are projects that we have already finished or projects related to national action plans where we help the governments to establish and to create the mercury reduction programs. Next slide, please, Joe. We are, how do we do this, reduce and help the miners to reduce the use of mercury? So we teach them and we install equipment to make these facilities to be efficient, to have a higher recovery, to have a higher efficiency, and help them to reduce the use of mercury by the introduction of mercury-free technologies. So the picture that you see there is a site in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have 3 facilities currently operating. So this facility is located in the province of Sulawesi, and that picture is showing the crushing and the classification stage of the process. Next slide. We try to be very innovative into the projects and to the systems that we deploy into the facilities. Here you can see this is a leaching reactor that we have designed for one of the facilities in Indonesia. Same reactor we have in 3 facilities, same leaching reactor. So in 2019, we were the first organization in the world to use alternative lixiviants in the mining, in the artisanal mining sector. We use at this particular project, we use some amino acids as a lixiviant. And in this reactor, we use 250 kilos, approximately 40% solids. We're getting efficiency, reporting efficiencies higher than 90%. So based on the results that we had in this project, now we move and we added a new circuit in the facility with the capability to process 2 tons per batch. Next slide, please. Joe. So the agreement that we have between the AGC and CML is very interesting. I think we have a two-way technical collaborations. I think CML and AGC, we both have realized that we have a huge potential and different expertise, and we're trying to mix those experiences and to apply and implement into the artisanal mining world. So the idea is to have the two-way technical collaborations with the experience that we have had in the field and try to introduce CML reagent, leaching reagent into the ASGM sector. ASGM is artisanal small-scale gold mining. The other agreement that we have is evaluate PGE's Planet Gold projects. And wherever we are actually running 3 projects, Planet Gold projects in the world. One of them is Burkina Faso, the other is Mongolia, and the other is the Philippines. So we think that the Philippines and Burkina Faso, they have the potential to use CML and lixiviation process into their system that we are designing for the facility. Also, we also have the agreement to represent CML in other ASGM projects worldwide. Next slide, please, Job. Then I would like to discuss with you, I would like to share with you the experience that we have with the test work of ore from the Philippines. Next slide, please, Job. So the Philippines project is a Planet Gold project. You can see there's the map of the Philippines. And we have an office actually in Manila, and we have staff already dedicated to the office in the Philippines. So these staff, they just finished the contextual study. They were able to evaluate different sites in the Philippines, and they came to the conclusion based on the findings and the contextual study that these 2 sites has the most potential in the Philippines to do the installation of 2 facilities. One place is Sagada in the Mountain Province. The other place is Paracale in Camarines Norte. Both sites, they use very basic gravimetric systems, and the concentrate, they use panning, and they do amalgamation with mercury. And the tailings, they sell the tailings to local cyanidation facilities, both of them. So the idea is to introduce into these 2 sites efficient equipment and teach the miners how to reduce the use of mercury or eliminate in the best case. Next slide, please, Joe. So this is the ore that we were able to test with the CM leaching. You can see the grade is 15 grams per ton of gold. It's 8 grams per ton of silver. There's a few organics into the ore. And basically, this, I will say, this is a quartz vein ore, gold ore with some pyrite inclusion, gold into the pyrite inclusion. Next slide, please. This is the blue mineralogy of the ore. You can see quartz is mainly prevalent into the ore. It's 54% is quartz, 25% is calcite. This is an organic compound that may be a challenge, maybe make a challenge ore to do the processing. And mica 6.49%. Yeah, next slide, please. This is the bottle roll test, leaching test. You can see the test conditions under this test. It was done at 40% solids, 24 hours leaching, 6 pH, 4 kilograms per ton of reagent consumption. This is a sustained, you calculate the bottle roll test by a sustained, and then you check how much is the reagent consumption. So this is the reagent consumption under this test. So the first 4 hours, the leaching they got is 40%. And after 24 hours, the maximum leaching efficiency was 70%. Why of that? It can be because of the organics content that made the reaction very reactive. I had a discussion with Paul, Kristina, and Nicole, and they were thinking on doing an additional testing. And on the next slide, we can see the tests that they did. They changed some conditions. In this testing, they did 10% solids for 48 hours, 4 hours, 60%, after 24 hours, close to 80%, and after 48 hours, close to 90%, 95% approx. So this is different conditions, different reagent mixing, and also different operating parameters as oxygenation. We are now discussing with the team how to do the test in the similar conditions that we did recover the 70% to see how it really behaves in general. Next slide, please. So the main findings that we can discuss and that I can discuss with you, it is the first is click please job. So there is a recovery up to 70% after the first 24 hours. The ore is very highly reactive at low pH, and probably is due to the presence of organics. You know that organics, there are kind of cyanicides, and also it affects the leaching. 90% after some adjustment as oxygen, dissolved oxygen injection into the system, and some chemical adjustments. I can tell and I can say that this is to do this leaching and to do the approach into the artisanal mining setting. It can be very simple circuit to apply, very similar to the reactor that I show in the previous slide. Very basic reactor. We plan to do more testing on Sagada and Paracales ore. We already sent this ore to Australia, and they will be processing very soon. So we want to investigate. We want to know more details about this. How do they behave in details? I can tell that the CN leaching reagent is an alternative where cyanide is an environmental concern. So there are countries that they are very open to leaching. They're open to cyanide, but there are some other countries that they are open at all. So this option, it's we can see a huge potential to implement these in projects where there is open to leaching. And finally, we are planning and we are interested in starting a trial test in Sagada. So Sagada, it's going to be our first project that will be testing in not a lab scale. We plan to do in a large scale to show the miners the benefits on these technologies. Next slide. Okay, so thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you have many questions. I don't know if I will be able to answer all of them. So back to you, Patricia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sixto. And yes, there are a lot of questions already in the chat box and Q&A box, so please keep them coming. Our third and final speaker is Ms. Nicole Looney, Clean Mining's Environmental and Technical Executive. And she will speak to us this afternoon on Clean Mining Solution Risk Assessment Report. Nicole is a Senior Technical Engineer for Clean Mining Limited and holds a bachelor's degree in Science and Marine Biology, focusing on ecology. She has a strong background in a laboratory environment, ensuring quality, safety standards, and associated protocols, adhering to industry and government policies. She has worked for several organizations in the mining industry, including Kelly Services, BHP, and SGS Geochemistry, where she has been responsible for the day-to-day management of the laboratory. These functions include sample analysis of minerals and ores, providing detailed reports for business decisions, and solution optimization. In addition, Nicole has been involved in providing environmental impact studies and risk assessments for a number of mining clients. She is based in Perth, Australia, and is focused on the testing and optimization of the solution together with managing the overall environmental client liaison requirements. So let us all welcome Nicole.
Thanks, Patricia. Okay, so thanks for that, Patricia. I just want everyone to know, like most scientists that I know, I'm a terrible public speaker, so bear with me. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the recent environmental risk assessment that was conducted on our thiosulfate leaching and extraction processes. So if you can start with the next slide, please, Job. So the assessment of environmental risks, plays a vital part in the process decision-making, the reduced adverse effects of commercial and industrial operations on the environment. So the purpose of this assessment was to examine the environmental risks posed by the general applications of clean mining's new gold leaching and extraction technology combined with dry stackable tailings. Commonwealth Science and Industry Research Organisation, also known as CSIRO, is an Australian government research agency responsible for scientific research who have recently examined the environmental risks posed by our technology. So CSIRO was the ones who originally developed the cyanide and mercury-free process, which is based on the use of thiosulfate and the released gold from ores. So after successful demonstration and field trials, the technology has been brought to market through Clean Mining Proprietary Limited. And the report was based on the information following the scenarios of dry tailings with no washing to recover reagents, which typically leaves 8 to 15% of the leachate content, and dry tailings with washings to recover reagents, which leaves 1.6 to 3% of the leachate content. So can you go to the next screen, please? So a hazard screening background was completed via a Tier 1 screening environmental risk assessment based on the process chemicals that evaluate the source data for chemicals in relationship to their persistence, bioactivity, toxicity, therapeutic organisms. So this is an approach used by CSIRO and other projects investigating the hazards posed by industrial chemicals and is based on standard procedures used internationally. So based on this screening background, the scientific literature flagged thiourea as the only chemical that needed to be looked at due to its chemical toxicity to algae, water fleas, and fish. So, however, it's not regarded as being persistent as its degradation in soils and waters is relatively fast. And then based on the low intrinsic toxicities of all other components of the leaching reagents, they were eliminated due to the low concerns. So if we can go to the next page, please. So what ends up in the leachate? So the release of non-targeted metals into solution present in ores through the complexation of CML's leaching and extraction processes was identified to likely occur. It's a similar issue that's found throughout most extraction processes, especially using cyanide, which works with the mobilization of most metals into solution. So based on that, the trace element concentrations were analysed from 13 different leachate solutions prepared from various ores along with rinse water supplied from Cyros and Clean Mining's demonstration plant in WA. And then the leachate solutions were passed through an anion exchange column to simulate online processes that remove some metal thiosulfate complexes. And then the data showed that a wide range of metals presented in dissolved forms and liquor solutions and varied between ore types ranging over several orders of magnitude. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So thiosulfate oxidization. Thiosulfate has the potential to oxidize through bacterial oxidization of oxidation of thiosulfate and other sulfur compounds, which can result in the formation of sulfitic waste. This was thoroughly investigated by Cyros Land and Water Department, which is an independent department from the Cyros Minerals, and in a series of experiments involving soils from Western Australia alongside tailings from EMCEE's demonstration plant. So soils were amended with a series of lixations and thiosulfate solution and were incubated under aerobic conditions representative of WA mining locations. The experiments were periodically sampled over an 11-week period. And based on that, all samples show degradation occurred over a time period of less than 50 days, with most treatments showing more than 90% in less than 25 days. So individual soil types and their properties play an important role in the rate of degradation of thiosulfate. So the next slide, please. So a summary of the key findings of the report that have been released on our website and show that thiosulfate on its own is intrinsically less toxic to living organisms than cyanide, and it poses a minute risk to the environment, and this is during operations, during transport and disposals of dry tailings. Clean Mining's blended reagent can be classified as non-toxic by the GHS system, but take note that any substance can be labelled as toxic at the right concentration, so that includes oxygen and water. The components of the chemical formulation used in our reagents leaching and extraction process were screened using standard hazard assessment protocols. As we said, thiourea was the only one flagged as being potentially toxic, and the scientific literature and assessment results indicated that the reagent readily degrades in both soil and water environments, which generally produces a non-toxic products over a relatively short time scale. So that's a half-life of several weeks. And this was both in soils and water. Take to note that our thiourea component is less than 10% of the formula. So by the time it gets into the ore and into the water, the concentrations are already below the detection limits that are considered potentially harmful. So if we go to the next slide. Applications of extraction process of the ores resulted in the production of waste liquors that contained a range of dissolved metals, which were all mobilized into solution through the affinity for thiosulfate. So these included lead, copper, cobalt, and zinc. And the risks posed by toxicity of the mobilized metals such as copper and gold, they formed more of a threat than the reagent itself. So that was a really good finding for us. And thiosulfate has a relatively low toxicity level by itself, but literature has pointed out that it does have the potential to oxidize through bacterial oxidization of thiosulfate and sulfur compounds known as thiosalts, which can result in the formation of sulfuric acid. However, it's important to note that the production of dry tailings, which is something that we really recommend, does drastically reduce the risks on sulfitic waste. So the fate of thiosulfate and its potential to produce acid was independently investigated by Cyros Land and Water Department in the series of experiments from soils of Western Australia, and to note the tailings from Menzies demonstration plant. The tails from the Menzies demonstration plant were from 2.5 years ago when they ceased operations. So we had a good chance to look at what our reagent would do on a timescale of over 2.5 years. So when we added leachate and thiosulfate to these soils and incubated them under the conditions that are representative in WA mine sites, we got a good look at an 11-week program and a 2.5-year program. And the experiments did not indicate any acidification of soils and showed progressive decrease in extractable thiosulfate concentrations. So this was supported, as you can see in the data on the full report, that it came through on the laboratory studies and the Menzies tailing studies as well. So if we go to the next slide. So the main summaries that we wanted to really bring to focus was the main risk for our thiosulfate extraction and recovery process is thiosulfate's potential to become acid waste. So based on the findings of both literature and our studies, we found that it is unlikely to occur because we've got pH bufferings in the system as they mix well with the solids matrix, and it's demonstrated when you view the full report. So 10 different experiments were conducted to investigate this likelihood of happening, and the standout conditions that showed out to us that had the most rapid decline of thiosulfate and no consistent changes in the soil pH were moisture levels representing 10% field conditions, which is why we recommend a dry stackable tailings rather than a wet tailings dam. And we looked at the elevated sources of trace elements in the dry lixiviants, which no other significant issues were identified to relate to specifically our extraction processes. So as I stated before, we do have similar issues with immobilized metals and most other reagents and extraction processes. So this is just something that you would monitor as your own individual mine site, not necessarily due to our reagent processes. We talk about the washing of tails reduces the risk of the residue leachates and will potentially help remove mobile metals that will go out to your tailings, as well as natural attenuation processes such as absorption, buffering, capacity, and dilution will reduce the impact of these as well. As when we did our laboratory experiments, we looked at dilution, barren solution going into tails, and this had the fastest decrease of thiosulfate concentrations, and the levels were close to or below detection limits within 2 weeks, which is vastly improvement on, say, 100% moisture conditions in the field. So the concentration and ranges of metals present will depend on types of ore being processed. So unfortunately, we don't have a magic reagent. If you've got something nasty in your ore to start off with, like arsenic or lead, before it's processed, it will still be there at the tailings on the other side. So it doesn't get rid of it, it's still there, and that will depend on your ore, how it's processed, or what's in it, and something that you need to keep an eye on for your individual mine site. And then overall, it was concluded that clean mining, thiosulfate, leaching and extraction processes combined with dry stackable tailings poses minute environmental risks. The risks identified are manageable through the application of appropriate monitoring and controls. So based on these findings, we recommend that you wash your tailings, one, to help recover reagent, but also to help remove any mobile metals present, and to produce dry stackable tailings to mitigate any risk of thiosulfate oxidization. And that's my presentation. So that's back to you, Patricia.
We now proceed to the Q&A. And like I said, there are a number of questions in both the chat and Q&A boxes. And for this part of the program, our three speakers will be joined on the panel by Kristina Kazakoff, Clean Mining's Principal Chemical and Processing Engineer, as our technical expert panelist. Very briefly, Kristina is the Chemical and Processing Engineer, as I said, of Clean Mining Limited. She holds a Bachelor of Engineering, Chemical and Process Engineering, and a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Western Australia. She has over 9 years of experience on site at gold mines in Western Australia and the Northern Territory in a variety of roles, including Senior Metallurgist and Processing Coordinator. She has been involved in the startup, design, commissioning, and maintenance of new plants and conducted many test programs on gold ores. She is based in Perth and is focused on technical domain pre-sales and process design for the operation of the non-toxic reagent thiosulfate for gold leaching. So let's begin with the Q&A. And I have one question, perhaps this is addressed to Sixto, coming from the president of the PMEA, Mr. Joey Ison. How was the choice of Sagada and Paracale made? There are a number of gold rush areas in Mindanao.
Yes, yeah, I've been trying to reply to the answers on the chat, but let me make a comment on that selection process. So because all these projects are Planet Gold projects, we have to do a contextual study before a full contextual study to have the sites evaluated. I think we chose probably we did 4 or 5 sites selection. We did a contextual study to each of them, and we evaluated into the contextual study environmental, social, economic, technology, and also risk assessment into the facilities, gender, child labor, also on this. So these 2 sites, Sagada and Paracale, they show the best indicators to select, to help us in select the sites of Sagada and Paracale.
Thank you. And jumping off from that question, and I address this to Kevin, because he has referred to the openness now, or the shift in attitude of the government. How is the technology being promoted as part of the development of the National Action Plan on artisanal and small-scale gold mining?
Yeah, from an artisanal perspective, we've just started the initiative, obviously, with the first presentation with the Philippine Mining Club a number of months back. But over the last few months, we've been working closely with Sixto. We will use the Artisanal Gold Council as our partner for the artisanal sector. For the larger sector, it's very much opportunity-led. We haven't been making any direct submissions to government as yet. We've been sourcing specific mines and looking for appropriate agencies in the region that can handle our sales go to market there and help us navigate the government departments.
Still a related question on government engagement. What has your experience been with the provincial and regional MGB offices?
It's been minimal, to be fair. We're very much sort of in the go-to-market, trying to find opportunities out there, and they tend to have those relationships in the government departments. It's something that we do need to work closer with both the communities, with AGC, as well as sort of the government provinces, and start dealing with them directly. We're open to those discussions. We wanted to get a few more bit more traction first.
Okay. The next question is not addressed to anyone in particular, but can the technology be used by existing mining companies who are already processing gold ore?
I can answer that one. Yes, the technology is available to be using for companies already processing gold. There will be some minor changes to how the circuit will flow at the back end. Mainly this comes around this dewatering process to create the dry stacked tailings at the end. But realistically, it's just a dewatering step, and that will depend on the scale of the process. But all the leaching tanks and things is exactly the same. Our elution process for removing gold from resin or carbon is also a lot simpler than a standard CIL plant, but there is really just sort of minor changes that need to occur to the plant.
Thank you, Kristina. Another question is, someone wants to know the source of your qualifying data.
I'm assuming the data on number of mines, etc., is what they're referring to, and that comes from Standard & Poor's.
All right. This one is for Sixto. Use of thiosulfate for gold leaching has been around since the 1980s. What were the hurdles encountered in applying this route for recovering gold, and the solutions or remedies made to make this process more feasible?
Again, I can probably answer that one.
Yes.
Thiosulfate has obviously been around since the 80s. The issues that have always come across relates to the leaching kinetics. And that's why when our reagent, we say it's thiosulfate based, but it also contains pH buffers, a catalyst and an oxidant. And where the real struggles have been in the past is getting this catalyst and oxidant system working, that you'll get effective leaching kinetics to match the cyanide. So that's why it hasn't really been implemented most recently, but that's what CSIRO have spent many, many years, and we have spent many millions of dollars on getting that real system working, that it's not just thiosulfate, there are other additives in there.
Thank you. The next question is from the president of Philex, Mr. Jules Austin. Assuming you already have a milling process intended for leaching and cyanidation, will there be a major capex to revise the plant to use this non-toxic solution, considering an 8,000 tons per day to 12,000 tons per day?
That's very similar to the question that we answered before about how does the plant actually change. The major capital expenditure would be on the dewatering at the back end of the system. For this sort of a 8,000 to 12,000 tons per day, you'd be looking at a thickener, followed by perhaps a plate and frame filter or a belt filter. So it just depends about the dewatering system that is chosen by each individual clients. There are many, many different options that can be utilized. So it doesn't really matter, but that'll be the major capital change, trying to recover the reagent and the water is this dewatering step at the end.
Thank you. Okay, 2 questions from the same person. Could you quickly describe what process changes, namely technologies, footprint, and budget aspects, are required for the recycling of both reagent and waters? And then the other question is, what is the recovery percentage of the CML reagent? And then I think I should ask this other question, which is related. What is the cost of the reagent?
So with these dewatering or reagent recoveries, they're all off-the-shelf equipment. There is nothing specific to us of this. Dewatering is quite common across the mining industry, so it will just depend as to what dewatering process the particular clients actually determine. And then that will result in the correct reagent recovery. So again, until you've chosen a dewatering process, we won't know the actual reagent recovery put back in. Reagent cost-wise, it's around about the $3.50 to $3.80 US per kilo, but reagent usage would vary depending on each client's particular mineralogy of the ore.
Adsorption with resin takes how long?
Very similar to cyanide. So with the carbon absorption, the resin absorption is very, very fast. That's just how it works.
Okay, I will read this as is. One of the main challenges in mercury replacement is the minimum quantity which can be processed through the new technology. Mercury can be used to recover as low as 0.2 grams of gold, especially alluvial gold ASM processing. Will this be practical also for the CML?
Yes, so our reagent, you just think of it really similar to how it behaves with cyanide and mercury. It does the same thing. It's all about dissolving the gold and getting it into a form that you can then recover. So that we have no issues with leaching even significantly lower grades than 0.2 grams of gold. Mercury is not as good at recovering gold. Mercury really is only looking at larger particles, whereas we can leach really ultra fine particles and the invisible particles, things that you can't see with the naked eye. And that's the advantage of our system, is that we can really expand the recoveries of gold possible.
Mm-hmm. Is the CML reagent suitable to be adopted to extract leaching the leaching the sulfide ore or carbonaceous ore?
Yes, as shown in Kevin's presentation that was earlier, we have done significant test work on all different ore sources, so including some sulfide ores where we've been able to leach quite well. And the advantage that we have on carbonaceous ore is we will significantly outperform cyanide. If you dissolve gold using cyanide and then use carbon as your absorption method, where you get the preg robbing effects is that dissolved gold will absorb onto the fine carbon in the ore. When you leach it with our thiosulfate-based material, this does not absorb onto carbon. So it means you don't receive any of those preg robbing effects, which is why we will have a significant advantage in a carbonaceous ore.
Okay, there's a comment here. We are now working on a project to reprocess gold tailings in one of the gold mining districts here in the Philippines. Will remilling the tails to 500 mesh increase recovery of the residual gold?
This will really depend as to where the gold sits in the tailings. There are forms of gold that are unrecoverable even with remilling. It will just depend as to whether the regrinding will actually liberate the gold and allow it to be available for leaching.
Okay. From the same person, currently there are sodium cyanide replacements coming in the Philippines from China. These GDAs or gold dressing agents are claimed to be non-toxic and work better than sodium cyanide. How will this compare with the thiosulfate leaching agent?
So we have done some test work on some of the gold dressing agents that have come through and found that they actually contain cyanide. So we do have a report through on one of them specifically. So really we're the only real genuine non-toxic solution out there.
Okay.
I have a comment on that, Patricia.
Yes, please.
So I had experience in Suriname. We use some dressing agent named Jinchang. And I did bring some of this leaching to Canada, and I did some testing in the lab. And when they did dilute the ginseng, the cyanide levels in the facility, they went high, very high. So it means that this reagent has a very, very high cyanide content.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sixto. Here's one for Nicole. On hazard screening on the Tier 1 qualitative screening / environmental risk assessment and bioaccumulation and toxicity to organisms, have you done screening also on aquatic plants, which small organisms use for food, shelter, and spawning, other than screening on fish and algae?
I am not 100% sure on that answer. Reason being is it was screened on the data that was available on past research. If it didn't show up on past research and it hasn't been looked up on past research, then the answer is no. But if it has been done on past research, then and it didn't show up, it didn't pose a threat. So I can definitely double check to see if it was in past literature and get back to you. But if it hasn't shown up for a certain reason, it's not there. It won't affect it.
Yes, there are some questions from people who want to contact you, asking if you have an office here in Manila, how can they set up Zoom meetings and so on.
So our contact details will be made available, and definitely we're always open to Zoom meetings. Nicole and I are based in Perth, but we do have an office also in Singapore. So we do most of our communications via Zoom. So once our details are out, just get in contact and we can arrange that.
Okay, thank you. There's a comment here. Modifying from 40% into 10% solids yielded 95% gold recovery after additional 24 hours of leaching. This is really significant. Hope to hear some underlying theories on this. Thank you. Who wants to address this?
So we did the test work on the 10% solids, and what we actually found out is that it's a surface passivation issue on the gold, which you don't have at the 10% solids because there's a significant more reagent and solution available in that mix. So now that we've identified that it's a surface passivation issue on the gold, we are then, we've actually done some additional tests in the last couple of weeks that we're hoping to get that same recovery at 40% solids. So we've identified the issue. It's just about changing how we're doing the tests.
Thank you, Kristina. Next question, what could drive up the thiosulfate consumption during leaching, given a constant throughput rate?
The changes in thiosulfate consumption will really depend on what else is in the ore. So there are plenty of other metals that thiosulfate will react with, but again, it's quite more selective for gold and silver. Also depends on sort of other oxidants within the system. So if there's significant dissolved oxygen, then there could be higher reagent consumptions as well. But really it's ore specific.
We have a guest from Malaysia wanting to know if there have been any inquiries on the non-toxic reagent from Malaysian miners.
I can take that one. In the early days, we had one query from a Malaysian miner. I believe it was listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange, but since that one, there hasn't been an awful lot of queries, to be honest. Most of it's sort of been Philippines, Indonesia, and Australia, if you're looking at a Southeast Asia, Australasia region.
Okay. I believe we've gone through all the questions, unless there are some. Okay, one more. One of the ideas presented is to make use of the end tails as materials for concrete blocks for embankment projection, especially on riverways. Will this contain the possible toxicity, especially the heavy metals?
This will depend as to what is actually involved, so what's in the ore to start with. So as Nicole pointed out, with our process, we're adding no toxicity to the ore, but if there are contaminants within the ore already, these will probably still be there at the tails. So that's something that would need to be investigated as a site-specific issue.
Thank you. Yes, I believe we've covered all the questions in the chat box and the Q&A. So unless there are any more,
Patricia, can I just ask a live
Sure.
question of
Sure, Roger.
Sixto? In my past, I've been involved in mining down in the Camarines Norte area, specifically the area where our RTG is, not in Mabilo, but in Nalaspitan, which is way up in the hills. And at one time, there were 10,000 small-scale miners there, and I presume they're still there and still using mercury. I mean, that would be an ideal site. You know, part of the problem, and I know the area, and I know a lot of the supply of mercury comes from some of the responsible persons in power. in my view, there may be some blowback from these people when their mercury business dries up. Have you had any indications that that might be the case?
Well, that is a really good question. We try not to compete with the supply chain of mercury. Sometimes the experience that we have seen in the worldwide with other projects, we try to do kind of partnership with them. So we include them into the chain of cost, chain of supply chain, not just to avoid them because they're part of the system, and we don't want enemies into the project. So yeah, we try to cover all those issues, and we try to include them as part of the solution.
Solutions. Okay, very good. Okay, that was my one question. Okay, Patricia.
All right. So that brings to a close our Q&A for this afternoon. And just to post some final reminders, as stated at the beginning of the webinar today, we will be issuing certificates of attendance to those who need them. You can request copies from Ms. Joan Falcotella. And for our next speakers for the Philippine Infrastructure and Construction Club and the Philippine Mining Club, the next webinars will be announced on our numerous social media platforms and in our newsletters. And we look forward to seeing you at those webinars. So the last part of this is for us to turn on our cameras for the photo. Please, if you could turn on your cameras for just a few moments.
Say cheese.
Hey, cheese.
All right.
Cheese. Cheese.
Please, cheese.
Hello, Joey.
Hi, Roger.
Hello, Eddie D. Nice to see you.
Okay.
That
Thank
is
you very
a
much,
very good
everyone,
story.
for your support of this afternoon's webinar. See you all again soon. For those who want to stay and chat, go ahead. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone. Have a nice
Thank you.
weekend.
All right.
Hi, Joey.
Bye-bye.
Hi.
Time for a beer.
Where's the beer?
In your fridge.